Welcome to the PBM Reform Podcast here on the Pharmacy Podcast Network. My name is Breck Rice. I'll be your host today. And I've had the privilege of working with community pharmacies now for over 20 years. I love the industry. I'll do everything I can to help community pharmacies. And I'm excited to be your host today and have the opportunity and honor to speak with Dr. Benjamin Jolly, Senior Fellow at the American Economic Liberties Project, co-founder of Hinge Point, co-founder of Apex Pharmacy Consulting, and the owner of Jolly's Compound Pharmacy. What do you do in your spare time, Ben?
What's
Interview.
spare time? For what it's worth, Hinge Point is dead. So you could kill that part. Just cut out the bit about Hinge Point. Um, it anyway, it died. So if you want to just clip this portion from the and the bit about co-founder of Hinge Point from the recording, that would probably be best.
Okay, well, we,
Um,
we can always put that in the RIP category for about the
yeah,
3,000 community pharmacies that have closed their doors in the last couple of years too. So.
yeah, that's so. Yeah, 3,126, I think is what I came up with from January of last through year through February of this year.
Wow, that is horrible.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, what do I do in my spare time? What spare time? Um, I
And
feel
we'll add too that you're also the brother of Megan, of course, too. So
yes.
that takes some time. I'm sure being her brother. Now I love Megan; she's great. I've had her on my community pharmacy more profit roundtable. Talking about
Yeah.
her nutrition line and how that helps patients that are their
Yeah.
bodies being robbed from nutrients that from prescription meds, and she's come up with a great solution for that. So yeah,
Right.
wonderful. And you're kind of a community pharmacy. I would say you're like royalty in community pharmacy. That jolly name. And tell us more about that. What's your history in pharmacy?
Well, my grandpa started our family business in 54.
Yep.
Um, as I said in a speech recently, that makes us the third oldest pharmacy in the state of Utah and the oldest pharmacy in Salt Lake City, by a long shot, actually.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, Grandpa started the business in 54. Dad took over with his brothers in the 90s, and then they all split ways in the early 2000s. Um, So I just work with my dad at Jolly's Pharmacy. Um, we, do compounding, fill regular prescriptions like any other pharmacy. We use an icon to count those pills. Anyway, I don't know. Um,
And what's the community you serve? So is it
Salt
more
Lake City.
rural? Is it actual the downtown
So
population?
we're in like a first tier suburb of
Okay.
Salt Lake City, a neighborhood called Sugar House.
Yep.
Um, so it's a nice area. I like living here. I like working here. Um,
Yeah,
but
but really close to a couple major universities. You've got
yeah,
University of Utah that's just up the road a little north from you, and then
yep,
you have a private school right there in Sugar House too as well.
yeah, we're like across the street from the private university, Westminster University. So
Yeah, it's kind of so what those for our listeners, Westminster is kind of like I would describe it as like the Hogwarts or the Harvard of Salt Lake, which my that's where my wife's undergrad is from, is Westminster. Really
oh,
nice
very good.
university.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice place. I love walking through their campus. I sometimes will detour on my way down to work. Just walk through the campus. But anyway, so that's like my family's story. My story, I started working with my dad in 2004 when I was a kid. Um, that was 21 years ago now. Um, I was clerking. Um, I started doing deliveries when I got my driver's license. When I graduated high school, I got my technician license, worked as a tech for dad. Um, I detoured into teaching language to Mormon missionaries for a little bit. Uh,
A foreign language? You speak a
Italian,
foreign
yeah,
language?
Italian.
Italian. Oh, wow.
Um, and then I went to pharmacy school after that in St. Louis. Worked for um, a gentleman out there, Chris, at Gateway Apothecary, and while I was in pharmacy school. Um, and I actually spoke to one of his staff just a couple weeks ago who said that he still talks about that I worked for him, which I think is too funny. Um, and then after I graduated, I came back and worked for Dad and as a pharmacist. And my first couple of weeks were rather rough. We had just had um, the pharmacy manager quit a week before. Um, I had a temporary pharmacist license, which is like an intern license, but I can say pharmacist on the phone, but I still have to be supervised by another pharmacist at the
Yeah.
time. Um, and my dad, yeah, I drive like all day, Friday, Saturday, get to my dad's house around noon on Saturday, sleep for a long time, and then wake up, go to church on Sunday, and then on Monday morning, he holds an all hands meeting and says, "Hi everyone, this is Benjamin. He's been gone for 4 years. He's in charge. I'm leaving for Europe. See y'all in 2 weeks." And
How
so
old were you at
I
this time?
so that was my baptism by fire
Yeah.
in the pharmacy community. Uh, so I was working 50, 60 hours a week to just keep afloat. I'm like, checking one prescription every 2 minutes because I'm a brand new pharmacist. I'm also trying to figure out how to make sure that the place doesn't burn down um, from just bad management or whatever, and try and make sure the place makes some money. Um, and then I got obsessively into direct and indirect remuneration fees. Made a name for myself, helping other pharmacies understand that. Um, and then started to get really involved in policy work. Um, I emailed a blogger too many times, and now I work with him. Um, that's how I got the economic liberties job. And anyway, and a few weeks ago, um, this was I had one of the most remarkable experiences of my life. I went to a Bernie Sanders rally and I spoke to the
I
crowd.
was hoping you were going to bring that up because I was going to ask about that, how
Yeah,
that came about, and then I also found it pretty humorous that Bernie Sanders went to the University of Utah but didn't go to BYU while he was there in town.
he's been going around to all of the places.
The liberal arts schools.
I mean, he went up to Missoula.
Okay.
He went up to Boise as well. Like I think it's more the ability to schedule than anything else. But anyway, um, I'm not here to defend Bernie. I'm here to to talk about PBM reform.
How did it all come about? How did you get the
Um,
gig?
so I know some of Bernie's inside people through my work, and they said, "Do you know any populists in Salt Lake City that could speak?" And I said, "Me, I can speak. I'm in Salt Lake City." Um, and so anyway, I basically just told the story of what most pharmacists know from a um that most pharmacists, especially those that operate independent pharmacies, that like the way that we get paid is really, really screwed up. And a large part of why is that PBMs and pharmacies are the same company. And I saw an analogy recently that it's like if McDonald's got to set the price of the Whopper at Burger King,
Hmm.
right? that and you had burger insurance, and so um, McDonald's paid Burger King for every Whopper they sold, but they cut the prices every year that they paid them. But and then they'd say you get $0 burgers at McDonald's and $15 burgers at anyway.
Yeah.
It's a whole mess. But anyway, um, and in that speech, I said that it should be illegal for CVS to be a pharmacy and be in charge of paying pharmacies. Similarly, it should be illegal for United Healthcare to be in charge of paying physicians when they are the largest employer of physicians in clinics in the country. They employ
Yeah.
over 100,000 physicians. They also own their own pharmacies and do the exact same tactics. Like just the opportunities for someone who is in charge of managing other people's money and in charge of billing the people that manage other people's money for services rendered, being the same person, is the opportunities to hide money, to screw everybody else in the system is just there are just too many.
Yeah.
Um, and so from my perspective, the solution here is they should just have to be separate companies. You make a choice as a company. Do you want to be in the service delivery business as a physician, as a pharmacist, like actually giving people care face to face, giving people medicine? Or do you want to be in the payments industry where your job is to bring down prices and your job is to ensure ensure there's no fraud happening and ensure like the role of a PBM is necessary if you're going to have third party payment for prescription drugs. You have to have someone managing who's in the network, who's credentialed, um, doing audits. Everyone hates audits, but like fraud happens, right? Um, so someone has to do these things, but it doesn't have to be someone who's a competitor pharmacy, right?
Right.
That to me is just such a perverse incentive. And so I gave this speech on a Sunday. On Monday, 39 state attorneys general signed a letter to Congress saying, "Hi, please pass a law that bans PBMs from owning pharmacies." And then on Wednesday, Sarah Huckabee Sanders signed a bill into law in Arkansas that said it's illegal for PBMs to own pharmacies in Arkansas. We're not going to issue any pharmacy permits, licenses to entities that are co-owned by a company that owns a PBM. Um,
Now,
and
Benjamin, that was one of my questions a little later on in the interview, but now that you brought it up, what is going to become of that? Is it really actually going to be applied, or PBM is going to do what they've always done and find some kind of loophole, or just, they probably have more attorneys on staff than all of our community pharmacies combined, right? So are they going to just fight it?
my assumption is that we'll see some kind of lawsuit at some point,
Yeah.
saying you can't do this because a lot of folks are assuming this is just like CVS, CVS pharmacies, but it's not. That law passed in Arkansas prohibits the ownership, the issuance of a pharmacy license to any entity, whether they are in the state or not. So, a Credo Specialty Pharmacy, CVS Specialty Pharmacy, Optum Specialty Pharmacy, all of those are prohibited from obtaining pharmacy licenses um, after a waiting period. The law goes into effect immediately, but the prohibition goes into effect January 1st, 2026. And then it has it's a really well thought through law, actually. It it recognizes that specialty pharmacies exist and in a lot of cases have monopolies on some products. Like the only place in the country that you can get the narcolepsy drug Xyrem is a Credo specialty pharmacy. It
Mhm.
is not available for sale at any other pharmacy, which means if you say a Credo specialty pharmacy can't have a pharmacy permit, that means that no one in the state of Arkansas can get Xyrem. Um, and there are a lot of products like that where there is a pharmacy that is the only pharmacy. the law allows an extra year in circumstances like that for those pharmacies to apply for an extension, and then they can have one more year before they cannot renew their license anymore.
Okay.
That gives manufacturers like Jazz Pharmaceuticals that make Xyrem the opportunity to figure out a different business arrangement so that they can have a pharmacy in Arkansas or another pharmacy that is not affiliated with a PBM um, to be able to distribute that product instead of just one pharmacy full stop. Um, and so, I mean, there will almost certainly be a lawsuit where PCMA, the PBM lobby, sues. That's how all of these cases go. But Arkansas is not a stranger to fighting PCMA. One of the biggest pharmacy cases in recent memory is Rutledge v. PCMA. Rutledge was the Attorney General of Arkansas, right? Um, and um, so they've fought PCMA and they've won in front of the Supreme Court before. So, and I think they don't have any, there's no love lost there.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. Let's back up just one second here. When you stated that in at this rally, at the Huntsman Center, University of Utah,
Yep.
how many thousands of people were there? I mean, it was well attended.
Yeah, so the stadium seats 15,000 people. It was packed to the gills. There were there was
Just
like
standing room.
it was standing room only.
Yeah,
There were another 5,000 people outside at the same time. So there were about 20,000 people
yeah,
present, which, is nothing compared to some of the other rallies that Bernie has done. But he said himself, it might actually be more impressive that we have 20,000 people in Salt Lake City than that we have 60,000 people in New York City,
yeah,
right?
right.
Um, and because Utah is a red state where people only vote Republican, right? No one has ever voted Democrat in this state ever before.
Not true, but yes, it is. It is. Yes,
That's the
certainly
perception,
the
right?
perception. And so the point I'm getting to is super full, packed house. You're dropping the mic on PBMs. What was it eruption of applause? How was the
Oh
audience
my
taking
gosh, it was thrilling. It was so so much fun to do. When you like my my neighbor also spoke and he introduced me and he said my friend, my neighbor, and my pharmacist, Ben Jolly. And as I'm walking up on the stage, everyone's just cheering and I'm like, wow, that feels really good, right? Um, and then over the next like as I started my speech, um I said that, I'm from I'm from Salt Lake City. I went to East High School. My family's pharmacy is the oldest pharmacy in Salt Lake City. And the crowd was just like, yeah, Jolly's pharmacy, yeah. And then I
it?
said, and um my patient's insurance through CVS, boo, CVS, boo. Like it was it really felt very good. Just
Yep,
from a personal standpoint. I mean, I don't have anything against people that work at CVS. It's just the overall company is I don't think should exist as it does.
yep.
Um, and the scariest part, the scariest part of the speech to me, I was afraid of the crowd for a little bit, was when I said United Healthcare. Um, I said OptumRx, her pharmacy insurance is through OptumRx, a division of United Healthcare. And if you want people to go be violent, just say United Healthcare. Like people really, really hate that company. That scared me. I did not realize that that would be a trigger word. Um, honestly, um, I was like, oh my, what have I done saying United Healthcare? Um, so that to me is another reason why we need this kind of reform is that people really, really, really hate the conglomerates
Yep.
and have gone to violent means to show how much disdain they have, especially for United. But like, um, it's it's honestly frightening.
Yeah.
Um, and like, I don't condone violence, but I heard the voice of the crowd when I
Yeah.
said that. And when I said it should be illegal, you should have the right to choose your pharmacy and not be forced to the pharmacy that happens to be owned by your insurance company. People really, really, that really resonated with a lot of people. Several people came up to me as I was walking through the crowd afterwards and said, you're really right. Like that should be illegal. Um, so I think that people really got it. It wasn't some foreign concept for people that like I'm just some weird nerd. People actually understand the meaning of, oh, I should be able to pick the pharmacy that I want to go to. Um, I should be able to go to a doctor that I like and have them be paid fairly and just not paid a much lower rate because they don't have their owner being Optum Health, right? Um, and so anyway, I don't know. I feel like a reason to do this is in part just so that the people who are running these companies don't have to fear for their lives. Because like I was frightened on their behalf.
Yeah, well, wow. It's I'm picturing like the Greek auditorium there, the Colosseum and the masses, saying whether they're giving the thumbs up or the thumbs down on a particular entity like a
Yeah,
huge health system, right?
right.
Kind of that same feeling. I do know how litigious PBMs are in general. Personal experience with looking at, how one major PBM that's been mentioned earlier took over the Department of Labor claims for workers' compensation, and how the incumbent was a great little PBM down in Tucson, Arizona, that worked well with the third party payers, and they had a good working relationship. But one major PBM wanted that book of business. And even though the federal government, when they went out for their request for proposal, they granted the agreement back to the PBM in Tucson. Um, the big PBM, big national healthcare organization, wanted that business, and so they sued to put a stay in place to make the federal government have to reopen the RFP process again. And I'm going to be a little bit like Mike Rowe here and say how I understand it. The story goes, because I wasn't there. I was very involved from being a co-founder of the third party that was doing all of those claims for Department of Labor and postal workers and everyone. That literally that big major PBM sued twice in order to win the business, and then just undercut the rate. And when the federal government saw, oh, this PBM will do it for this rate, not realizing what the trickle down effect was going to be on all the community pharmacies that were serving those patients, it was a really bad situation. What is it? Minus 88% now of AWP is what that federal rate is for for caring for your local postal worker or a federal
Right.
employee. No independent pharmacy can dispense at minus 88, but that's what the PBM, that's how they won the business, right? It's just undercut it. So I know how litigious they can be. And so that's why I asked that question, Benjamin, do you think there's going to be a big lawsuit over, especially with Arkansas, because they're very vocal about it. Governor Huckabee, I love what she's doing there, and they're very vocal about kicking the PBMs out of having ownership in their state.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been it will be interesting to see. They haven't sued yet, I haven't seen any lawsuits yet, so maybe they haven't come up with a viable argument for why it should be unconstitutional or illegal or something like that. Because I mean, states can issue licenses however they want, really.
Yeah.
If they want to put like it's the state's authority to do so, and so I don't know that they will sue or if they'll just go for a capital strike strategy of just we're just going to close the pharmacies and you all figure it out. Um,
Well, there's enough independence in the populace of Arkansas that they won't have any problem serving that patient population there. I know for a fact.
yeah.
But let's say personally, for you and Jolly's Pharmacy, what has been your personal experience with the impact of PBMs on Jolly's Pharmacy over the last few years?
Um, so one of the biggest things, um, of where like I think I can see how Jolly's became a much smaller entity than it otherwise could have been because of the actions of PBMs. Um, when I was when I was working in the mid 2000s, okay, so 20 years ago, um, we did a fair volume of specialty pharmaceuticals, Humira, Enbrel, that kind of stuff. Um, and we took good care of our patients. We had a gentleman who was a trucker, long haul trucker, who absolutely did not want his Humira to come to him by mail order because he did not know when he would be home. And if it came by mail order, it would be sitting in his mailbox potentially for several days. And so he really wanted to use a community pharmacy, specifically ours, because he could place the order and then pick it up anytime in the next 2 weeks. That's how pharmacies traditionally operate. You fill the
In
order
a climate controlled environment, not in a
precisely,
scorching hot mailbox or a freezing cold mailbox in the wintertime.
precisely. And um, so we were doing, um, a lot of business relative to today. Today we basically don't fill those medicines at all because one, PBMs have put in place policies that say you cannot process this for this plan. It has to go to our specialty pharmacy. Um, and similar, and in addition to that, even if I could dispense the medicines under a patient's plan, um, the economics have just gotten upside down. Um, when we were filling Humira 20 years ago, we would make 5-10% of the sales price of the product. Today we lose 5 or 10% of the sales price of the product, uh, because the discount rates have just gotten more and more and more intense over the past 20 years. Um, and so like unless something changes, I don't want that business back. I want it back from I want to be able to take care of my patient standpoint, but from a financial standpoint, unless we were able to get a different price point negotiated, I don't want to fill any specialty medicines because they're just upside down. Um, the you buy it whack minus 2.5 and you get paid whack minus 10. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Um, and so um, anyway, that because of choices that PBMs and people affiliated with that work with PBMs have made over the last 20 years, that business has migrated to mail order pharmacy, and that trucker is now no longer able to get his medicine in a community pharmacy. He has to get it through mail, and he just has to figure it out.
Yeah. And
Um,
a good example for specialty, but have you seen the letters that patients get for even just common
oh
uh,
yeah,
maintenance medications like omeprazole? If
yeah,
if they have refills on that, they're getting the letter that makes it look like it's mandatory for them to get it through mail order, right?
right. And in a lot of cases, it will say you'll save money, and when you actually like do the math of what the pharmacy is being paid, they actually spend more money. Um, because and usually the mechanism for this is like in a Medicare plan, you have differential copayments for a preferred pharmacy, a standard in-network pharmacy, and a mail order pharmacy. There's different copayments. So a tier one drug might be $0 at a preferred pharmacy and $0 at the mail order, but $5 at a standard pharmacy. My pharmacy's in network is a standard pharmacy. I've never been offered a preferred pharmacy contract, so I don't have the opportunity to give people drugs for free. Um, but um, or you'll have a tier two drug might be the copay is nominally $10 at the preferred pharmacy, $15 at the standard pharmacy, and a 90-day supply is $20 at the mail order. Um, but that's the maximum copayment. When you actually take into account the reimbursement rate that's allowed to the pharmacy, it oftentimes comes in lower than the copayment. And so the patient's just responsible for 100% of the cost. And a lot of times that 100% of the cost is actually lower than the mail order copay. Um, I mean, I gave the example in my speech of billing a 90-day supply of a seizure medication and receiving a response of you can collect 36 cents of copayment from the patient, if I remember the numbers right. Um, and then we'll take back a 31-cent fee, so you get a whole nickel to fill the prescription. 36 cents. This wasn't a Medicare patient, but if that medicine was on one of these plans with a tier two 90-day copay of $20, 36 cents is a heck of a lot less than $20, right? Um, so the patient doesn't actually save money by going to mail order. They now have to pay $20, and the mail order pays themselves like $60 for this drug. Um, there's all sorts of like screwed up stuff that happens with just that kind of letter that's incredibly misleading, and it really bothers me. I mean, you like, and you go on Medicare.gov, Plan Compare, the website that the government runs, as a patient, and you say, I take these medicines, which plan should I pick? And like fully half the screen is dedicated to advertisements saying, please go to a preferred pharmacy. You'll save money if you go to a preferred pharmacy. And in some cases, that's literally true. You do save money. But in other cases, it is absolutely not the case. Um, there are, I have seen on Medicare.gov where um, if I put in my pharmacy that's a standard pharmacy and I put in CVS pharmacy that's a preferred pharmacy, and I put in a list of drugs, um, some of those medicines will be cheaper at the CVS. Some of them will be dramatically more expensive. Um, one of the examples would be duloxetine, Cymbalta generic.
Mhm.
Um, the allowed amount on one plan here in Salt Lake at Jolly's is $15. That's the total reimbursement. Patient copay would be $20 for a month's supply because that's the tiering of the medicine, but it's just $15 a month. If they go to CVS, um, I think the copay is $15, but the total reimbursement is $237.16. Like, I don't understand how that's okay in anybody's book. Um, I get why it's done. I mean, it means that you can tell people to go to your pharmacy, it'll be cheaper for them, and then make more make more money doing it. But but the statute of the Medicare Modernization Act that created Medicare Part D explicitly says, in no cases shall such a reduction in copayment, i.e., for a preferred pharmacy, result in an increase in payments by the secretary to the plan. So I don't think anyone has like sued a Part D plan over this before on like a key tom basis, but I am fairly certain that it is explicitly prohibited in the Medicare statute to pay a preferred pharmacy a total reimbursement that's higher than a standard pharmacy. Um, like, because you would have to come up with some argument that doing so does not increase payments by the government to the Part D plan. I have a very hard time believing that. Um, anyway, so the system is rigged. And we need to unrig it. And part of that is saying if you're a PBM, you can't own a pharmacy. Another part of that is saying that you can't pay, like, you can't steer people to a pharmacy and then pay that pharmacy more money than you would pay a competitor pharmacy. That, especially when you're passing through funds. If you want to do that with your own money, I guess that's fine. But if you're using government money to do that, that seems really, really screwed up and corrupt. Um, I think that from a from a global perspective, we need to have PBM separated from pharmacies. We need to have um, just the government saying this is how pricing should be done. Because right now it's just the wild, wild west, and so we get 36-cent seizure medicines and we get $7,000 cancer drugs that really cost 15 bucks. Um, and I've described this as going to Vegas and pulling the slots.
Yeah.
Um, there shouldn't be 777 drugs. There shouldn't be two cherry drugs. Pharmacies should be paid as service providers. We should be paid a reasonable amount to account for the labor involved and the professional service provided,
Mhm.
plus the cost of goods of the product, not random markups that sometimes are negative $50 and sometimes are $5,000. Because that's the
Depending on
status
the
quo.
formulary, yeah, too, that's being directed by the PBM, setting the formulary so that they're getting
Yeah.
maximizing their reimbursement.
I mean, I think if we're going to have third party payment for prescriptions, someone has to set a formulary somewhere, right?
Mhm.
Um, Formularies are powerful tools to be able to um, get people to use less expensive medicines and to, in the current status quo, which I don't really like, to be able to negotiate down those prices, which is that's valuable. Um, I don't think that we're going to ever have a situation where there's not someone setting a formulary, but it doesn't have to be someone who uses that formulary for their own personal benefit.
Exactly. That was the point I was making. Well, one
Right.
more thing that I would, add to the list of, we're making a wish list here of how things
Making a
go.
wish list of grievances. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Is the unbundling of networks, pharmacies that are held hostage to be in all the networks when maybe there's a few networks that don't make any sense to them. So, I can speak personally from the work comp standpoint, right? You may want to be able to serve the 65 million lives in United Healthcare, but you don't have any need for their Timesys network, for instance, if you're a community pharmacy. But today you're held hostage, right? It's all or nothing. They say, hey, you're going to get Optum and everything that goes along with Optum, Catamaran, Cypress Care, Timesys, the whole bundle. I think unbundling would be very beneficial to community pharmacy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most egregious bundled contract is the discount card network. Like, um, I remember talking to a now defunct PBM, uh, a few years ago, and I was applying to their network. This was in 2020. Um, and I said, "Hi, I would like to be part of your network." And they sent me a contract, and I said, "I would like to delete this clause that states that I am part of your discount card network." And they said, "No, take it or leave it." And I said, "Okay, fine, I'll take it." And then a few years later, Caremark and GoodRx teamed up in their little Caremark cost saver program where Caremark, you bill a claim to Caremark. If the copay is lower through GoodRx, they actually just forward the claim to GoodRx and process it that way. Um, which means that when I billed CVS Caremark, They forwarded the claim to GoodRx, who then forwarded the claim to this PBM, who had forced me into this discount card network. Um, and so the claim was processed under this discount card network that I explicitly did not want to be part of. In the interim, um, that PBM had lost all of their relevant business. Um, so when I noticed this happening, I actually just said, "Hello, PBM. I would like to be out of your network. Please terminate our contract." And they said, "Okay, fine." And so I terminated the contract, and suddenly CVS wasn't sending claims to GoodRx and then sending it to this PBM anymore. It was they would send it to other PBMs, and so they still do this, but the number of prices that they can compare against is shrunk because I'm no longer part of this network that I do not need and that does not serve me at all. It only serves to reduce my reimbursement from Caremark, which is a really perverse way of thinking about a pharmacy network.
So, what is the most frustrating or damaging PBM tactic or policy you have to deal with today?
um, that's a good question. I mean, pricing is the thing, right? The price points set are the thing. Um, I mean, just yesterday I billed a claim and it came back with a MAC price that was $30 less than I could get from any supplier. We source from 15 different suppliers, so I think that's a good estimate of the whole market. So I don't know where they're coming up with their pricing, but it's simply unjust to expect people to um, provide product below cost, right? That's insane, um, and that is the biggest thing. I think that pricing reform is very important, but the reason that pricing is the way it is, in my mind, is largely because the PBM, especially the vertically integrated PBMs, have designed a system where we basically have a waterbed where you push down the reimbursement um, on the community pharmacies that you're competing with, but then you're able to push all of that that you're all of that revenue that you're charging to your clients overall into claims that are for specialty products that you bill yourself. And so every time every time I see a claim where I'm paid 36 cents and then I see a claim where PBM pays themselves $7,000 for a product that costs 15, see the JP Morgan Chase lawsuit. Um, that's money that's being taken from what should be the reimbursement here and put into that abiraterone prescription. Um, and that exists because you can hide money from a plan sponsor by shifting all of that volume into a couple of prescriptions that are not commonly dispensed and then dispense them yourself and earn that margin. Um, that to me is like that's why I'm so much in favor of a structural reform, saying you just can't be both. Um, I the Liz Warren and Josh Hawley introduced the Patients Before Monopolies Act in December. It would make a federal ban on companies being the same company if they're a PBM and a pharmacy. You just have to divest within 3 years. Um, I think that's like that would solve a lot of the problems. It is not the problem in itself, but it leads to an incentive system, right? Where you want to be able to basically cream skim. You you centrifuge all of the fat out of milk and then you cream off the top, right? That's exactly what a PBM is doing. I get the skim milk and they get the cream, right? And so, but there are um, so many other problems in the system that we could talk forever. Um, but that to me is like the biggest solution. I think we need more than just that because um, my brothers and sisters that work in at CVS and that work at Walgreens and are encouraged to work off the clock and are encouraged to um, fill prescription after prescription after prescription until they have a heart attack and literally die in the pharmacy. Rest in peace, Ashley. Um, the separating PBM ownership from pharmacies will not solve that problem, right? Staffing of chain pharmacies does not change just because suddenly they're paid on a fair basis as the pharmacy. I think that we need first structural reform so that there are fair payments, so there is money flowing to community and not just to a few vertically integrated pharmacies. Second, we need payment reform to just say, thou shalt pay on a cost basis rather than on a AWP minus basis, because that's insane. Like ondansetron doesn't cost $1,200. I'm sorry, but it doesn't. And saying that you got a 99% discount on ondansetron, congratulations, you're paying $12 for something that cost me 4. Great. That's a 99% discount. It makes you sound really good, but that's an insane basis to pay. Like AWP should be outlawed. Uh, and we should replace it with just cost plus a fair dispense fee, the way that Medicaid pays everybody. Um, and third, though, honestly, some labor reform. Like if because we need to have a different labor model that accepts that pharmacy staff are human and cannot fill 400 prescriptions per person per hour. I'm exaggerating, but like not very much.
Right.
Like there are so many cases where I hear about a pharmacist working alone in a pharmacy, getting abused by their customers because um, because they simply are not able to do all of the things that corporate demands on the staff that they've been given.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if we change those things, we could make pharmacy great again.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, make pharmacy great again. So let's bring it back to the patient's level because in your opinion, do they understand the PBM's influence on pricing or even access to the medication, or is it always the pharmacy's fault?
It depends on the patient and their personal lived experience,
Yeah.
right? Most people don't.
Hmm.
90 plus percent of people don't. Um, People who have to get specialty medications for them or for their kid or for their spouse and have to go to one of the vertically integrated specialty pharmacies, they get it. They understand that this is a problem. Um, because for a lot of these folks, because these specialty pharmacies um, are so um, corporatized, I guess, and so abstracted. They take every step of filling a prescription and separate it into basically different departments in the pharmacy. Um, it offloads a ton of the work that I do for my patients onto the patient, right? Um, when like a lot of people when they have to get specialty medicines, they describe the process as it's like getting a second full-time job. You have to call and call and call and call and spend hours and hours and hours on hold and arguing with people who don't have the authority to solve the problem. Uh, the the patient experience at vertically integrated specialty pharmacies is rock bottom. It is horrible. Um, like it is. I don't say this lightly, um, but like if your Better Business Bureau rating is like less than 1 star and could be one, and it would be 0 stars if it could, your business shouldn't exist. Um, and And the whole basis of these companies is we are the PBM, we're going to force people into our own pharmacy, and then they have to figure it out.
Yeah.
We don't have to earn we don't have to earn patients into our pharmacy. We don't have to earn these prescriptions by treating people well. We get them by dint of being a monopoly. Um, and that's just wrong. Um, like when you talk to mothers who like where a dog went and like ate a prescription bottle and then to get a replacement product shipped to you, you have to spend 12 hours on the phone. Um, like that's just, and then you have to wait for 2 weeks to actually get the product. It's most pharmacy operators, like community pharmacists, don't see that patient experience because they just get the rejection that says must go to specialty, and then they say, okay, I guess your insurance says you have to do this. Um, and very infrequently will that patient come back into the pharmacy and say, hey, this is awful. Like, how do I fix this? How do I make this work better? But um, the patients that are most affected by this are really, really abused
Yeah.
by the system.
Yeah.
And it's really upsetting.
Yeah, well, for those just joining us, you're listening to the PBM Reform podcast on the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Our guest today, Dr. Benjamin Jolly, the infamous Dr. Jolly, that is helping and is such an advocate for community pharmacy across the nation, and somewhat of a legend in his own right, right in his own backyard there with his recent speech at the Bernie Sanders rally, which was pretty exciting. He had standing room only in that auditorium. We are at the tail end here. I do have some fun facts I call rapid fire
Okay.
that I throw out at you and just off the cuff for you, Benjamin. So, are you more of an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl.
Okay. And do you prefer the mountains or the beach?
Well, I live in Salt Lake City. That should answer your question. The
I know
mountain.
you live in the mountains, but sometimes the beach is
I mean,
fun
I
too.
enjoy the beach every now and again, but I live by the mountains and skiing is a thrill. So,
Yeah, yeah, love it, love it. And then I'm going to switch up this last one because it's for a lot of my guests, I ask if they prefer coffee, tea, or something else. I'm going to say Coke or Pepsi or something else.
um, what's my preferred beverage? Hmm.
Yes.
Um, I really quite enjoy the mint limeade at Cafe Rio.
Ah,
That's,
okay,
that's
very
one I'd
nice.
go for. So,
Okay, very nice. So next time that I'm up there visiting, I'll have to take
sure,
you out for a mint limeade then. That sounds
why
good.
not?
Well, thank you, Ben. It's so great to have you on as our guest today, and I know you've got a really busy schedule, so I appreciate you taking time out for the PBM Reform podcast here
Of
on the
course.
Pharmacy Podcast Network. My name is Breck Rice, advocating for the heart of community pharmacy, our community pharmacists. So, thank you so much for your time again today.
Thanks, Breck. Good to be here.